Welcome to the Moral of the Story podcast, a show in which two cousins, a Harvard lawyer and a Baptist pastor, discuss good stories and explore their moral and ethical meanings from a Christian perspective. I am the pastor, J. Colin Trissler. She is the lawyer, Evie Bryda. And today we are continuing, Evie, our discussion of Cormac McCarthy's award-winning post-apocalyptic novel, The Road. Now, in our first episode, we walked alongside the father and his son as they found a reason to keep on living among the ashes of a dying world. And in this episode, we'll take a look at our two main characters, the father and the son, and see what makes them the good guys. We ended the last episode right after the scene in which the father saved his son from the evil and hungry clutches of a cannibal. The father used one of their two remaining bullets to shoot the cannibal dead. The whole situation, of course, traumatized the boy. We left off with the boy asking his father this question. He asked, "Dad, are we still the good guys?" And the father replied, "Yes, we're still the good guys, and we always will be." So our goal for this episode is, after the father makes this proclamation, to analyze the father and the son's standard of morality and see if what the father said is true. Are they the good guys in an objective sense? We'll study their behaviors, which, as you remember, in the previous episode, Cormac McCarthy is so adept at describing the behavior of his characters. We'll analyze their behaviors and see what sets them apart from the other immoral characters that they run across, the bad guys, as the son calls them. Now, specifically, we will analyze the fathers and sons' behaviors and their moral principles, the moral principles that they establish, and contrast them with the evil people and the principles that they've established or lack thereof or whatever. And over this episode partially, but more so in the next episode, we'll watch the boy grow into a man. And we'll get more into the physical details of that in the next episode. But this episode, we're going to talk about how one of the main parts of growing into a man or a woman, if you're a young girl, is developing a hierarchy of values and a system of ethical principles to live by. So that's what we're going to look at here today. We'll pick up the story with the starving father and his son scavenging for whatever food they can find. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind, lack of food and starvation are a constant state of being throughout this section of the story. So we'll see how this setting, the fact that they are starving and physically weak, we'll see how this aspect of the setting plays into our ethical theme. The father and the son are physically weak. They are exhausted with hunger, but yet in spite of their hard circumstances, they still work hard to maintain their sense of morality and their allegiance to the ethical principles that they hold to. And Evie, this reminds me of Satan's temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. One thing that Satan is just notorious for, he never really gets you at your strongest point. You know, he always finds and picks you apart and finds where your weak points are. And he comes at you when you're at your weakest and where you are at your weakest. And it reminds me a lot that that's what he did to Jesus when he tempted him in the wilderness. And that, I believe, is really the test of how loyal we are to the moral code that governs our lives. When we are in our weakest moments and it's easy to compromise and we still hold true to what we believe to be right, that really is the strongest testament to our code of ethics and to our faith. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's absolutely correct. And, C.S. Lewis talks about this in the Screwtape Letters, and he's following the life of this young man, and he's basically really talking about sexual temptation, saying a lot of times the temptation is the strongest, not when desire is the strongest, but when you're at your weakest, you're tired, you've been resisting. It's set in a time of war where it's during the Blitz and they're just fear all around. It's a little like The Road in that way. And he brings up that point that it's when you're at your strongest, you also have a lot more energy to resist the evil, to resist the temptation. But then when you're weak, where is that strength going to come from? I mean, really, it has to come from God. But I think that's exactly right. I think we know from experience that's how temptation works. That's how Satan works to try to get us.
Humans are made up of both body, flesh, and spirit. And when your body, and there's a connection there too. They're not two completely separate things. And when your body gets worn down through hunger or pain or something like that, your will has a tendency or temptation to get worn down as well. So when your body is hungry, when your body is tired, it's almost like your will and your ethics, that's when they're more vulnerable, like you just said. And it's really a testament to who the good guys really are. No matter what hardship they're going through, no matter how tired they really are, they hold true to that code of ethics that they govern their lives by. And I really like what you said there. When we are physically tired, and we need to rely on Christ at all times, obviously, but it's when we're, like Paul said, when we're in our weakest moments, that's when we really are at our strongest, because it's in those moments that we're relying more heavily on the provision of God and the strength of God to get us through. And that's the only way we can keep in those weakened moments, is to rely on the strength of God when those temptations hit us in those weak moments.
Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, and so many times I think we've all had this experience where you don't feel like you have any more strength, and then God gives that to you, and you feel His presence all the more for the fact that your sort of natural strength, like your natural willpower that you may have, you didn't have it anymore. The only thing that got you through was grace. I mean, of course, at all times, we know at all times, whenever we're able to do anything, it's because of grace. But sometimes we're just so much more aware of it because we are at our weakest moment, and
Right.
you can't even pretend, well, that was me exercising my willpower, because it was not.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly the next point I was going to make. It becomes so abundantly clear that, when you get through a hard time, there are times when I've gotten through a hard time and I've done something or accomplished some goal or just survived some temptation or whatever. You look back on it and you're like, I have no idea how I got through that, and it was only by the grace of God that I did. And you can look back on it and say, I had really nothing to do with that. Yeah, that was God's strength all the way through that carried me through that. And I really liked that point that you made.
And that's not to say that, I am always successful at resisting temptation. I mean, I think we've all also had the experience where we've been at our weakest, and we did give in. We did not ask God for His grace, and
that's why it's easy to sympathize with people who do compromise. They don't make a habit. Or they don't failing is not a lifestyle for them, but everybody stumbles and falls, and that's what separates wise men and women from fools. Is a wise man doesn't sit there and just wallow in his mistakes. He doesn't wallow in his guilt. A wise man asks for forgiveness. He repents. He picks himself up, dusts himself off. He cleans up his mess, and he goes forward a wiser man or a wiser woman. And that's the difference between a wise man and a wise woman and a fool. A wise man learns from his mistakes and keeps moving forward, whereas a fool either stalls out or either backslides. And that's one thing I really like about this book, is this whole book is a hard circumstance for these characters. And the fact that they are governing their lives, they are trying to hold to that morality that makes them human. That's what sets us apart from the rest of the creation here on earth. And holding true to those ethical principles, those moral principles that God has set aside for humanity. The father and the son are holding true to that even in the midst of this hardship.
They don't really have anything naturally good and enjoyable to kind of rely on for strength either. It's they're having to go through a world that doesn't offer easy choices for them at all at any turn. Right,
and it's easy. Last thing, and then we'll move on. Last thing here is, it's easy to say what you would do when you're in a peaceful situation. But when you're put in a hard situation, that really shows your character. A lot of people can talk and a lot of people can make predictions when things are good. But it's when you get in those moments of hardship and you're experiencing that hardship, you're experiencing that pain, that sadness, that discomfort, whatever, and you still hold true to your ethical principles. It's those hard moments. Now, we don't like those hard moments. But those hard moments do reveal our character, and they show if we truly have faith and we truly believe in the ethical principles that of God's word that we claim to govern our life. Well, it's in those hard moments when we prove whether or not we're true disciples or not.
Yes.
All right. All right. Let's see. Now we move on to the next section here, where the father and the son come across a dog, and now remember they're starving, and they're weak with hunger. They've ruffled through, some grocery stores and stuff, some houses, and they don't find much. They don't find any food. And then the boy hears a dog barking in the distance, and he asks his father. And this is not something that we in our neighborhood here. We live in this rural community. I hear dogs barking all the time. But in this world, the world of the road, hearing another living thing is something that's very uncommon. And so they hear this dog barking, and the boy asks, "Where did it come from?" And the dad says, "I don't know." And the boy says, "We're not going to kill it, are we, Papa?" And the father says, "No, we're not going to kill it." And then McCarthy, as the narrator there, says, "He looked down at the boy, shivering in his coats. He bent over and kissed him on his gritty brow." And the father says, "We won't hurt the dog, I promise." And think about this section, or this scenario here. Even though they are starving, the boy makes the man promise not to kill the dog. Now, what does this interaction say about the boy's values? And I'll let you say your piece, and I'll answer my own question there. But what do you think? What does the fact? Remember, they're starving, and food's not easy to come by, and they haven't found food in a while, and they've got this dog that they could go kill and eat, but they choose not to. Why do you think the boy is so adamant that they not kill the dog? What do you think that says about the boy's character?
But I think he has such a pure appreciation for life, and for a creature that is weaker than himself, and he takes a delight in relating to another creature. I think that's part of it.
I think that what this shows is, like you said, good guys, they do value life, and in this world where life is scarce, life is always precious, no matter what the circumstances are. But it's like in a world where life is scarce, it becomes even more precious. But I think this does objectively show that the boy values life. And while the father, let's be honest, I can say this from a man's perspective, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. I think men have a tendency sometimes to, this is just the rational thing to do. We're going to kill this dog and we're going to eat it because we need to survive. And it's almost, you take emotion completely out of the way. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being rational. We should all be rational. And I would say that being rational is also involving your emotions to an extent. Not letting your emotions dictate what you do, but not being some cold-hearted, killer either, and cold-hearted and carrying out things. And I think the boy, and then we'll get into this a little bit later, the boy keeps the man, keeps him from sliding into that cold and hard-hearted way that a lot of people in this world seem to have gone. And I think the dog, the interactions with the dog typify that. The boy values life, and the father doesn't want to upset his son, so they let the dog. They end up not killing the dog. And I think if I'm not, one last thing, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that dog belongs to the family at the end that we come across at the end of the story. If I'm not mistaken. I do believe that's correct. I'll have to double check on that. Because right here, after we get this interaction with the dog, the next scene is the boy sees another boy. And we'll get into all that too. So, and then the father swears they're being followed, but he can't find any evidence of that. And as we'll see in the next episode later on, that it was this family that was following them and watching them. And I believe that dog belonged to that family. So that's what I think the whole thing is there with the dog. It shows that the boy values life. And I think that's one of the highlights of being a good guy. Don't you? A good girl, just a good person all around is a value of life. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And I liked what you said about the father's perspective seems to be the rational one of how could we use this dog? But it's the boy who sees to the truth of what kind of creature the dog is. And of course, an animal is not on the same level as a human being. Right. There are things that ethically you can do with an animal that you ethically would not do to another human being, because human beings are made in the image of God.
Right.
Animals are not, but then animals are also living creatures that, you know, God has given a stewardship over those animals, and we're supposed to look out for their interest and treat them well. And I think it's the boy who sees to the truth of what kind of a thing this dog is and what it is and its value, where the father is seeing what can we get out of the dog. Right. And, you know, what's interesting, the cannibals, it's like the ultimate desecration of a human being, because you're using another person for food. But there are midpoints to that, you know, becoming callous. I mean, maybe it's not unethical to, if you were to eat a dog and you were starving, maybe it isn't, but it's kind of part of that process of becoming callous, to where you're not living in light of the truth of what you are and what God's creatures are.
And that is exactly right. You're 100% right, because you don't go from just a normal person to being a cannibal in 20 minutes. You know, there are stages that you go through. And I think killing and eating things that you wouldn't normally kill and eat, and things that belong in a home, like a dog, that, you know, we tend to see as, you know, more, they're, like I said, they're domesticated. They're more parts of the family. Dogs and cats and those type of animals are more parts of the family than like I said, a deer or a hog or something like that. And I do think that the boy, that's what we were talking about, the boy is keeping the man from stepping onto that road. And he's keeping him on the road that keeps them human. You know what I mean? That path, maybe I should say. And
exactly, yeah. And a regard for the life of animals is part of that. Right.
And it goes into the carrying the fire conversation. This is where they have that conversation where they come up, you know, carrying the fire. The father and son, they're sleeping in a parked car. I believe they're beneath an overpass. And in the darkness, so they're sleeping out there, it's dark. And in the darkness, they see these little bits of light that speckle the night grid. So there's darkness, and then there's these little speckles of light there. And these are other people. And the boy says, who are they? They know that there are other people like them out there. Who are they, Papa? The boy says. The man says, I don't know. And this is where we get into that carrying the fire dialogue. Carrying the fire is the term they use to, that's what makes them the good guys. It's a righteous action on their part. And in the midst of all this darkness, there are these little bits of light out there. And the father and his son are doing their part in carrying the fire, carrying that light in the darkness. And you know, there are other people out there as well, I think is what Cormac McCarthy is getting at here. And we'll do this little quick dialogue, and I'll toss it back to you. He says, the boy says, we're going to be okay, aren't we, Papa? And the man says, yes, we are. Nothing bad is going to happen to us, right? And the man says, that's right. And the boy says, because we're carrying the fire. Yes, the man says, because we're carrying the fire. And this carrying the fire, you know, like I said, it's about carrying that fire of humanity, that fire of morality in the midst of a dark and dying world. And that's another thing that good guys do. Good guys value life, but they also carry the fire. They continue carrying that fire throughout the darkness, that fire of morality. They do not compromise on their integrity, no matter what. And that's what it means. We keep carrying the fire. Would you agree with that?
I do. And do you think the implication with the different pinpoints of light that is that there are other people out there who are carrying the fire? We haven't met them yet. And I think the end of the story answers that question. But I think to me, that's part of the question that's being raised when the boy asks, are we the good guys? And you're wondering, well, are they the only good guys left? And I think the story eventually answers no. But I think that's also part of what we're seeing here, that maybe there are other good people out there, but they're not interacting with them at this point.
Right, and that's one thing that is kind of in the subtext here on some of this stuff. And no, they are, our characters are the good guys, but they're not the only good guys out there. And that's exactly right. And the father, we'll talk about this a little bit later on. He sees everybody as a threat. And he and his son have these discussions, and he says, yeah, there are other good people out there. And I think the boy says, well, where are they? And the father says, well, they're hiding like us, you know. And then, but everybody that the father comes across, he treats them as if they are a bad guy and a threat. And I'm not saying he's necessarily wrong for that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on as, you know, some other stuff kind of unfolds here. So Speaking of the other good people out there, the father and the son, they have this dog. They see the dog, and they don't kill the dog. They see other bits of light out there in the darkness. And it says the father is sure they're being followed, but he saw no one. And this will come into play later on in the story, and we'll talk about it in the next episode. The father is going, he's scavenging through some houses there. The boy is outside. The boy sees some movement, and he sees a face looking at him, a boy about his age wrapped in an outsized wool coat with the sleeves turned back. And the boy starts to chase him, and he's excited. And he calls out to the boy, "Come back, I won't hurt you, come back." And the boy, our boy, is crying. And he's chasing this boy. And, of course, the father comes out and grabs him by the arm, and he's kind of sharp with him. And he says, "What are you doing? Do you want to get us killed? You're making too much noise. There's no one here to see. Do you want to die?" And the boy is so longing for other companionship. And the father asks him, "Do you want to die?" And the boy says, "I don't care." And he's just kind of lost it emotionally at this point. "I don't care. I don't care if I die." And then the man, calms down. He hugs the boy and he apologizes. And he says, Don't say that. You mustn't say that. That you don't care if you die." And I think the takeaway from this little interaction here is there's a big difference between surviving and living. And the man is so focused on surviving, whereas the boy wants to really live. And the boy wants to take a chance, and he wants to build relationships with other good people. And the father is very cautious about that, and rightfully so. But people who are overly cautious they may oftentimes miss many opportunities because they hesitate to take risks. And that's one of that's the kind of the yin and yang of this decision making, the responsibility of the father. He's got to protect his son, but at the same time, you do want to join up with other good people.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because in this interaction, they both are right in some ways and wrong in some ways. I mean, the boy is wrong to say that he doesn't care if he dies, right? And the father rightly corrects him on that. But I think the boy is bringing a corrective to the father as well to say that, well, part of being alive, part of being a human being is to have these connections with other people. And I think that they both are, they're both bringing something to each other. They're teaching each other something in this interaction. But that the boy does have to learn that you have to value your own life, that survival is important. You can't be reckless with your life. At the same time, you weren't giving your life just to survive. You're giving your life to spend it, and to spend it for other people, and to be connecting with other people. And that is just the balance that you always have to strike. There's no necessarily rules for how you do that. It's, I think really, as Christians, we're thinking we believe we're guided by the Holy Spirit in this. The Holy Spirit gives us guidance in a lot of situations of making these kind of choices. Should I help this person even though it might put me at risk, or should I not? Because there's moral principles on both sides of that. And I think the boy and the father both see part of that. And I think a lot of times we're in situations where we see both parts of that. You see the danger, but you also see the benefit to yourself or to another person if you were to reach out to that person or do something.
And the cool thing about this is the boy, this really shows the boy's heart here, because as they move on, they make their way out, and the boy is worried about that other little boy that he saw. Right. He doesn't see him as a threat, and he doesn't see him as someone he can take advantage of. He sees that other little boy for what he is, a little boy like him who needs someone to take care of. And I'll read this bit of dialogue here real quick. The boy says, "What if that little boy doesn't have anybody to take care of him? What if he doesn't have a pop?" And then the man says, "There are people there. They were just hiding." And the boy kind of pulls on the man's coat, and the man says, "What?" And the boy tells his father, "I'm afraid for that little boy." And the dad says, "I know, but he'll be all right." And then the son says, "We should go get him, Papa. We could get him and take him with us. We could take him, and we could take the dog, and the dog could catch us something to eat." And the man says, "We can't." And the boy says, "And I'd give that little boy half of my food." And by the way, this is something that the boy has been doing anyway with his father. The father wants to kind of give more to his son, And the boy says, no, you take your part. I'm not going to take food from you. You eat your part. And so the son keeps going, we can do it. We can do it. I'll share with him. And the man says, stop it. We can't. And then the boy's crying again. And he says, what about that little boy? What about that little boy? And, the father wants to live like ghosts. They kind of come and go. They don't leave any tracks. They don't really leave any evidence of their existence. And the boy actually wants companionship. He wants to build something, human relationships with other people, other good people. He wants a family. He doesn't want to spend his life running. And I think this is further proof that we call him the boy, but like we talked about in the last episode, he started to leave that boyhood behind, and he's starting to think like an adult. He's willing to take on the responsibilities of being an adult. He wants to settle down and take care of other people beyond himself. And again, I think this is one of the other characteristics that makes them the good guys. Good guys want to join up with other good guys. They want to build a life. They want to build a home. They want to develop and nurture and protect their family relationships. And I think this is one of the signs of a good guy, and this is one of the characteristics that makes the boy and his dad objectively the good guys here.
I think you're right. And I was also thinking the father's approach to other people, where he sees them as a threat, and he keeps his distance from them, that could potentially put the father on the path to becoming very callous, where he's not looking at other human beings as a gift, that he's a gift to them and they're a gift to him. He's viewing other people solely as a threat. Well, I mean, like you said, you don't become a cannibal over the course of 20 minutes. And I'm not saying the father is on the brink of becoming a cannibal, but that is part of that hardening process where you're not viewing other human beings as for love. You're viewing them as someone who could threaten you. And the boy still has some of that softness. And I think part of what the father does for him in this story, I think the father sees some of the problems with the father. The father sees the hardening in himself, and I think he is making an effort to preserve that softness in the boy, that responsiveness to other human beings.
Yes, that's an excellent point. That's very true. And I just, in general here, that the boy in this story is keeping the man from growing hard and growing cold. And I think boys, children, and family in general keep men from growing old and bitter and cynical in real life. I think that's one of the blessings that having a wife and children do for men, is it keeps them from hardening up and from really developing a cold heart. It teaches men how to nurture and how to provide and protect, and it gives them responsibilities that men need, values to care about and values to preserve. And that's one of the benefits of having a family. And having family is tough. Even if you're not married, even you obviously have some parents somewhere because you're here, and even having any sort of family can be tough. But at the same time, there's so much meaning and so much reward in having good, healthy family relationships that it's worth really taking on the responsibility.
Well, right, because we become who we are in our relationships with other people. I mean, they bring things out of us, and it's in our sacrifice of ourselves that we, as Christ said, if you will want to find yourself, you have to lose yourself first.
Right, and that's what I think the boy here is. This is a perfect example. The boy in this story is keeping the man from giving himself over to that coldness that this world kind of encourages. This world in the road would encourage that coldness and that hard-heartedness. And the boy is keeping the man human. He's keeping him a father and not just a man going through the world looking to survive. He's keeping the man a father and therefore retaining his humanity. And now, speaking of humanity, we're going to get into three parts here that show a lack of humanity on other people in the world of the road. We did mention that there are other people carrying the fire out there, and there are also on the flip side of that coin, there's some very, very, very bad people out there in the world, and we're going to come across three gruesome scenes of violence that reflect the darkness and evil that is in the world. And the first one is just kind of a regular scene of viscera, as Cormac McCarthy labeled it. It's some viscera that the savages have left behind. Let me read that real quick on page 94 in my book. It says he'd seen it all before. They're moving across the ground. He'd seen it all before, shapes of dried blood in the stubble grass and gray coils of viscera where the slain had been field dressed and hauled away. The wall beyond held a frieze of human heads, all faced alike, dried and caved with their taunt grins and shrunken eyes. They wore gold rings in their leather ears, and in the wind their sparse and ratty hair twisted about on their skulls. The teeth in their sockets like dental molds, the crude tattoos etched and some homebrewed woad faded in the beggared sunlight. And you get the idea of it. And he walked along the wall, passing the masks in a last review. And the boy didn't see all of this. And the father goes back to the boy, puts his arm around his shoulder and says, "Okay, let's go." He shields his son from that scene of violence. And that's just something that they come across kind of on a normal basis, on a pretty regular basis in this world, just these leftover remnants of brutality. And that's part of the world they live in. And he does his job and he shields his son from that. And there's this one other part, it's one other paragraph. McCarthy kind of gave us a glimpse of the world as it was in its death throes, as it was starting to break down. He said, by then all the stores had given out and murder was everywhere upon the land. The world soon to be largely populated by men who would eat your children in front of your eyes, and the cities themselves held by corps of blackened looters who tunneled among the ruins and crawled from the rubble white of tooth and eye, carrying charred and anonymous tins of food in nylon nets like shoppers in the commissaries of hell. And that's a pretty good description right there. And that just shows how quickly, when the world starts to break down, how quickly people let go of their ethical values, and they do what they have to do to survive. And I would say, I don't know about most, a lot of people, when they're on, like, I know I keep going back to Batman, but like the Joker said in The Dark Knight, he's like, these people are only as good as the world allows them to be. And some people are. Some people are only as good as the world allows them to be. But when society breaks down, these people let their true selves show. And they all morality and all humanity pretty much goes out the window. And they start acting like this, murder and all this other stuff. And there are people who are like that. And there are people who are like that in this world of the road. And that's who the father's trying to protect his son from.
That's true. Because in a good society, you make it so that there are negative consequences for behaving in an evil way, right? Right. A bad society, which I think this is about as bad as society can be, it almost looks like it's an advantage to be evil. It's an advantage to go through and be completely insensitive to others and just every person for himself. I mean, so this is sort of the worst possible society. And every real society is somewhere in the middle. I mean, there's obviously never been a society where there's no benefit to lying and cheating. I mean, where being corrupt doesn't get you ahead. I mean, that's the reality of every real human society we've ever been in. But I think you're right, though. There's always good in human societies, that we support each other. We make it so there are consequences to negative behavior, and that helps to train people to be good. Now, when the restraints come off, you see how much were people really trained underneath, how much were they really becoming good people because they were helping to society was shaping them into virtuous people, or how much was society, the law, or the government, whatever, or just restraining them and providing negative consequences. I mean, because those are two different things, and I think both of those happen. Like when you have the law, part of its function is to teach us what is good and right. On the other hand, there are people who choose to be evil, and they're held back only because of the consequences of breaking certain rules. Right. And I think you're right. The less you have law and order, the less you have a good society. You see that difference. choosing to be good is choosing what kind of person you want to be. It no longer really necessarily benefits you in getting ahead in the world. And I think that is what you see in this story.
I like what Jordan Peterson said one time. He said, an axe murderer without an axe is still a bad person. Just because
that's
somebody
a very good point.
he has the capacity to kill. He just doesn't have the means to do it. And just because he hasn't killed somebody doesn't make him a good person. He's still an axe murderer at heart. And the first chance he gets, he'll act on that. And that's who these people are. These people the civilization is all just an act. Because as soon as civilization crumbles, these people show who they really are, and they really show how dark their hearts are by acting this way, by murdering and killing and raping and looting and pillaging and all this other stuff. And then we get this other scene here. It's just a parade of utter depravity. McCarthy describes it's marchers. It's almost like a parade. It's a caravan. And their marchers are four abreast, he says, dressed in clothing of every description, all wearing red scarves or some variation. Now, I'm adding this part in. Red, of course, is the color of blood. So I don't know if that's, signifies that or whatever. And the father and his son, they say, they hide. Face down, the father says, don't look. And so they're hiding to the side, and they watch just this caravan of depravity go by. And an army in tennis shoes is how McCarthy describes it, tramping in military formation to a satanic drumbeat, armed with the 3-foot pipes threaded through with links of chain fitted at their ends with every manner of bludgeon. The people are also carrying spears and lances tasseled with ribbons, long crude blades hammered out of truck springs. The boy is terrified, and this parade, this caravan passes 200 feet in front of them. They're only 200 feet away from them. And behind this caravan of these warriors, there came wagons drawn by slaves in harnesses and piled with goods of war. After that, the women, perhaps a dozen in number, some pregnant, bringing up the rear, McCarthy says, is a supplementary consort of catamites. Catamites are boys kept for homosexual practices with men. So you've got that going on here too. They're ill-clothed against the cold, and they're fitted in dog collars and yoked to each other. And this is just an absolute parade, a caravan of just heinous human sinful depravity is all this is. This is people who are living by might makes right. And if I've got the might to, take slaves and make people into slaves, I'm going to do it. If I've got the might to take children and make them into my sexual slaves, then I'm going to do it, because I can do whatever I want in this world. All the structures have broken down, and now I can do whatever I want. And this really, I think, out of as far as like sticking with me, this is one of the scenes here that really stuck with me out of this book. Just this level of depravity that human beings are capable of descending to. And this is not overstating it. I really do believe if a situation like this in the road really happened, you would see something like this. I mean, you see
there are times in history
today
where these things have happened, right?
Right.
Right. Human trafficking is a real problem in the world. People do these things.
In a civilized society. I mean, it would just be worse if society breaks down.
Exactly, yeah.
And
but one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something I think is an important point. It's the book is talking about good guys and bad guys. It's easy to look at the worst examples and to think, well, are some people just irredeemably bad? And I think as Christians, we don't believe that. We don't believe that anyone is so bad that God can't save and heal them. Right. But at the same time, people have made choices, and yes. When you choose sin over and over, it compounds. I mean, that's the origin of a vicious cycle, that sin becomes a habit until you start with something small until it becomes something absolutely monstrous, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I do think that's what you're seeing here, the compounding effects of small choices. But I do want to make the point, you can't just look at it as a clear division of these are the good guys and these are the bad guys, and the bad guys are irredeemably bad, because I mean we all know, I think Solzhenitsyn said that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys are bad because they chose to be that way. I mean, these
Exactly,
people
right.
here, now the people who are in chains are these children, these other people they're not in those chains because they want to be. They were there because they were put there by force. But these other people who are the strong people, I mean, I say strong, the more powerful people here, they have shown what was in, they've given themselves over to the deepest, darkest parts of that shadow that lives within every human being. And they are, their conscience, like Paul talks about in First Timothy, has just grown cold, you know, and now they are just,
Right.
they have just given themselves over to their depravity. And this just, I'm telling you, as far as stuff that just gives me a shudder, stuff like this, I mean, I still think about this today and I just, you know, I just get that little shudder, because this really truly is evil. This is objectively evil. These people who have made these choices to live their life this way, to forcibly subjugate other people. And look at all the time they've spent with weapons. And McCarthy describes them in military terms like army and war and the way they're marching and everything. And so these weapons aren't for protection. These weapons are for conquest and to take and to pillage. And the women, he says, the slaves, and then these catamites, the boys kept for sexual practice. I mean, that's just dark, man. That's dark. But the bad thing is that's real. You know, he's not saying anything there that hasn't happened before. That doesn't happen today.
That doesn't exactly, that happens today.
And that's the world that these people live, and that's what the Father is trying to guard his Son against.
Well, you know, to go back to what you were saying about the family is what trains a man, that the weaker people in the world, your children, they're meant to be protected. The purpose for your strength is for you to help and protect other people. And of course, that's true of a grown woman as well. But I mean, a man and a woman are different. And I think you're right. That's what a man learns in a family, by being part of a family. And in this case, you have these people living not in a family structure, and the strong exploit the weak.
Right.
They don't have any obligation to protect the weak. Whereas the way a good society works is it's made up of families where those who are strong take charge of those who need their protection.
Right. And this isn't about protection. This is about subjugation. This caravan,
exactly.
It's subjugation. And that's a huge
Whereas
difference.
a family is about protection.
Right. And a family is about love. And this is just about power. This is accumulating power is what these people have done here. And you can tell by the way they've got it sectioned off. They've got the warriors in the front. They've got the women, you know, all congregated together. Some are pregnant, like they're there just to carry babies or something like that, you know. And maybe some of these women are involved in this too. I mean, you know, women are can be just as dastardly in their own way as men can, you know. And then you've got the other stuff bringing up the rear there. And that's the world that the father and the son live in, with that sort of stuff going on. And the boy understands now, after this interaction with the cannibal from our first episode, that there are bad guys in the world, lots of them. And they're they can be easy to spot. Sometimes they're not, but a lot of times bad guys, bad people are easy to spot. And the boy sees that now. And that's part of growing up, that's part of maturing. And that's part of being wise, too, is being able to spot the bad guys and call them out for who they are. These are objectively bad guys here. And these are people that need to be avoided at all costs.
Well, I guess to tie back to another point I was making, too, where I'm contrasting this kind of exploitive society with the family. I mean, obviously, exploitation can take place within the family, and that is one of the worst evils that can happen. But what you're seeing in this story is the family doing what it should. The father has this son who keeps him soft, who keeps him in touch with who he is, and he's got someone to protect from these evils, and that is a way that guards this man from being turned over to that himself.
Right, and these people in this depraved caravan here, it's like they lacked that. They lacked somebody or something that kept them tied to humanity, you know. And I think we, like you mentioned, Solzhenitsyn, and you know, we all have the capacity for evil.
That's
you know,
right.
And that's why it's so important to be aware of evil and understand your own capacity for it in order to avoid it. And I think the son is helping the father do that. Like you mentioned earlier, these people didn't just one day start doing this. This was a process, a multi-step process there. And the boy, I believe, we all could descend into that. And the boy is helping the man, keeping him away from that, keeping his conscience intact. And I just, this scene here is one of the worst in the book for me, just because it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable to read and think about.
Well, to me, the scene that stuck in my mind is the one that's coming up. The house.
Well, let's move on to that.
That's the one that,
So let's move from one to the next. We're going to keep it on the dark page here. All right. So after this, the boy and the man hide. They don't come into contact with this caravan of depravity. And then days pass. The hunger grows. Now, there's one thing here. If you blink and you'll miss it. I've read the road about 3 times. And I didn't really catch it till this last time. The boy and the man had fallen asleep, and it was snowing at this time, and they saw some wagon tracks that had in the snow that had passed them. I think they said no more than 50 feet from them. Maybe it was 20 feet. I don't remember, but didn't notice them. Okay, and with tires that had like rubber on it. He kind of. So I thought he's describing this on purpose. It's going to come into play somewhere later on. And as we'll see, so there's that. Then some days go past. Then they come up to what we talked about, the cannibal house. Okay, they come across this grand house. It's on a rise above the road. There are fields and woods surrounding it. Okay, and it looks pretty nice. It looks just like a nice, rural, house there. And the father wants to go inspect it. Why? Because they're starving. They need food. The boy wants to leave it alone. It's like the boy's got sense enough now to be able to spot a dangerous situation when he sees it. And the boy is adamant, let's not go here. I just got a bad feeling about this. Let's not do it. And the father's like, we have got to get something to eat. We have no choice. And so desperation now is pushing the father to take risks that maybe he normally wouldn't be making or wouldn't be taking. And the father, enters the house. He and the son, they've got the pistol drawn. They enter the house. Everything looks, like these other rundown houses that they go through. This house, though, had signs of occupancy. Great piles of clothes, shoes, belts, coats, blankets, stuff like that, sleeping bags, and mattresses, that sort of thing. And the boy is at this time so nearly terrified. He's nearly in tears. And they're still in the house, and they see ashes. They see blackened pots. They look outside. They see a long cord that's tied to a brass bell. They smell, horrible smells, he says, of like mold and excrement. And then they come across this hatch in the floor that's held down by a padlock and got like some steel plates or something on top of it holding it down. And the father says, there's a reason this is locked. And I guess he thinks maybe there's a cache of food or something under there. So he's driving. He's being a little reckless here, but again, they're starving. And he says, we've got to eat. So the father goes outside. He finds something to help pry this door open. When he was outside, he saw a 40-gallon cast iron cauldron, kind that was once used for rending hogs, as McCarthy said. Underneath were ashes of a fire and blackened pieces of wood. Off to the side, a small wagon with rubber tires. And this goes back to that wagon with rubber tires that he had mentioned just a little while ago that had passed them in the road and didn't even notice they were there. And a smokehouse, a tool shed, stuff like this. And so he goes and he pries open the hatch, Evie. And they go down in there into that, little what do you call it, a cellar sort of thing. And what do they find? He's got the lighter. Now they had this lighter that they were using for fire. He goes down there and thinking maybe they're going to find some food. And what do they find?
People huddled and just awful. So, to me, this is the scene that makes me shudder when I think about it. I mean, just weeks after reading it, that's one that stays in my mind.
And those people, you mentioned it earlier, those people are kept down there like a meat locker for food. That's what they are there for. McCarthy describes it, people huddled against the back of the wall were naked people, male and female, all trying to hide, shielding their faces with their hands. On the mattresses lay a man with his legs gone to the hip and stumps of them blackened and burnt, and the smell was hideous. And the father goes down there and sees this and understands what this is. Okay, the people around him start, when they realize it's not one of the people that lived there in the house, that were eating them, these people start pleading for help. And Now here you can get into, did the father make the right decision or not? The father grabs the boy, they turn and ran, they lock the hatch behind him, and he leaves those people in there. I mean, he locks it back down so that they can't get out, and he takes his boy and he runs. And the people who were there at the house, they approach the father and the son, make a run for it. The people who ran the house, they're the cannibals. The father and son make a run for it. And the father actually thinks, this is the moment where I may have to do it. This is the moment where what I've talked about, we may get our backs up against the wall, and I have to put a bullet in my son's head and kill him because I don't want him living in a situation like that. The man actually thinks that this is going to be that time when I have to do it, and he doesn't want him being eaten limb from limb, over a period of time. He doesn't want him being chained up and dragged around like some catamite. And but then he realizes, I can't do it. I cannot kill my own son. So he gives the boy the gun, and he tells him how to kill himself. And because the father just doesn't have the will to do it. The father's plan is to run and lure their chasers away, and leave the boy to kill himself if he gets caught. And he thinks about that too. But then he says, I cannot leave you. I can't leave you. I promise. He says, I was going to run. I was going to try to lead them away, but I can't leave you. And then he tells his son, I won't leave you. I won't ever leave you. Do you understand? And so the time came for the man. He thought he may have to kill his son. He may have to abandon his son to save his son's life. And he just can't do it. And I think that testifies to the father's true love for his son there. They stay hidden. They stay undiscovered. And then when they first chance they get to leave, they run off. And while they were sitting there hiding, waiting for that chance to leave, they hear other hideous shrieks, coming from inside the house, just from people doing whatever in the world they were doing to those people down there. And he covers his son's ears, and to protect him from that evil and that brutality. And when the coast was clear, they left. And McCarthy said they were so weak they staggered through the woods like drunks. And the boy says to his father, if they find us, they'll kill us, won't they, Papa? The dad said, shh, no more talking. And the father and the son was like, won't they, Papa? Won't they kill us? And the man says, yes, they will. No, shh. And so they continued on, starved, exhausted, sick with fear. And Evie, what do you think about the father's behavior here? He had a chance to save those people, and maybe he realized it's either them or us, and I'm going to save me and my son. What do you think about the father's actions here?
Well, I don't like it. I think that's part of what the horror of this scene is for me, is that the father has to just leave. He leaves, you hear the screams from inside the house. So it's not just you encountered an evil, it's almost, how did the father become involved in it by closing that door again? I mean, I guess there's three things he could have done. I mean, one, close the door and run, which is what he did. And that's almost, in my mind, the worst he could do, because it was sort of, it's us or them. I'm going to close this door. The best chance for me and my son is close it, leave the people here, and we run. He could have left the door open and maybe give them a chance, give them a little bit better situation they have, or he could have affirmatively tried to help them. And you can kind of see why he might not have done that. I mean, maybe it would have been futile. Maybe that really would have put himself and his son at risk. But it's really hard for me not to think that he could have left the door open. He could have done something. And I think that's how the boy feels. I think that's why throughout the story, the boy is telling his father, I wish we could help more people. I wish we could have done more. And I'm not sure the father's telling the truth when he says, well, I was going to run. I was going to try to lead them away. He didn't try anything like that. I think this, and then we see the father again confronting this question of whether he should kill his son to put him out of his misery or to keep him from this situation. And I think that's the wrong choice. I think to kill another human being is always evil. You can't do evil that good may come. So I think this is
to murder.
Right. Well, I don't think you can kill your son, or I think killing another human being deliberately and it's not in self-defense is wrong, and you can't do it for that other person's good.
Let me interrupt you here.
You can't do evil that...
No, go ahead. Go finish.
You can't do evil that good may come. So I think this is not the father's finest moment. Now, I think he learns from this and he moves forward and does grow. But to me, I don't approve of his choices here. I mean, that's not to say that I would make better choices, but I'm uncomfortable with where he leaves the situation.
And
it's part of what makes the scene so powerful.
I'm going to push back just a little bit. I do believe the father was telling the truth that, I mean, he didn't want his son ending up like one of those boys in chains. And he didn't want his son ending up down there with his legs cut off, being eaten limb by limb over a period of months or whatever. He didn't want that for his son. And I think he got to the point, I may have to put a bullet in my son's head here to spare him this, because there is no other choice. I'm going to kill us because if there's any other option, we would be taking it. He actually thought they were getting to that point. Then he realized, I can't do that. I cannot kill my own son. So he was going to lead the people away. I truly believe the father is being authentic here. I believe he's doing what he can to protect his son, even willing to give his life, have them chase after him and probably catch him because he's so weak with starvation. And as long as his son could get away. I do believe the father is being sincere there. Now, his question of, did he do the right thing here? I see what you're saying. And I do believe that his behavior could be open to criticism. Let me read this part here. So after they get away, they get some breathing room between them and the bad guys. The boy, he sees how the world is, and the boy lays there. They're able to take a little break. The boy lay there with his head in the man's lap. McCarthy said. After a while, he said this. The boy too had been thinking about this, and the boy just out of nowhere said, "They're going to kill those people, aren't they?" The man says, "Yes." The boy says, "Why do they have to do that?" The man says, "I don't know." And the boy says, "Are they going to eat them?" And the man says, "I don't know." And the boy says, "They're going to eat them, aren't they?" And the man says, "Yes." And then the boy says, "And we couldn't help them because then they'd eat us too." The man says, "Yes." The boy says, "And that's why we couldn't help them." The man says, "Yes." The boy says, "Okay," like he understands now. And so there is a bit of a self-preservation going on here. And I think we all would agree, when I know we all would agree on this. Good guys don't eat people. I mean, right? I think we can agree on that. No matter how hungry you get, you just don't murder people and eat them and treat them as cattle. You just don't do that.
Exactly.
And the man and the son don't compromise on that. They both agree that is just the most horrendous evil that there is. And what do you think, though? If the man had let those people out, they wouldn't have gotten away, a lot of them. But then people would have known that somebody was in the house that let them out, because they would have seen the lock, broken there or whatever. And then they would have been looking for them and chasing after them. And the father said, put yourself in that situation. I got to protect my son or these people. I'm choosing my son over you people. It's not like it's a callous decision. Maybe he's thinking that's the only one he had at that moment. It's because, they were exhausted. They couldn't just sprint and run. They were already, about to lose it physically anyway. And
that's true.
I'm not saying what he did was right either. I'm not defending what he did. I'm just trying to, say maybe it wasn't his finest moment, but at the same time, he thought, between my son and you people, I'm sorry, but I've got to choose my son. That's my God-given responsibility, is to do that. And if there were a way to save both of you, I'm sure this man would. But I don't think he saw it that way. I think he saw it as one or the other, and he chose his son. And that's a hard decision to make. Right?
Oh, yeah. I think what's powerful about this scene is that there is real ambiguity in whether he did the right thing, whether he could have done more. He speculates if he had tried to do more, that it would have endangered himself and his son. And we never know that. And
right.
I think that gets at something real about a lot of the ethical choices we make, that we really, a lot of times we don't know. We don't know what the consequences are going to be. And a lot of times you just have to do the right thing. And that's why I keep saying you can't do evil that good may come, because, first of all, as Christians, we don't have consequentialist ethics. We have to do the right thing,
right?
Even if it might lead to a bad result sometimes. But the other thing, we don't know what the result's going to be either.
Right. And I want to read this here real quick, and then we can move on past this. I agree with what you're saying there, and I think we'll both agree this is a hard decision. And,
yes,
and the man had to make it in a split second like that, and he went with his son. And I can't say I fault him for that. You can say, well, it was kind of cold-hearted. We're not in that situation either, and his main purpose is getting his son out of there.
Yeah, I can't say it was wrong. I think part of it, we're meant to put ourselves in that situation and just understand how hard it would be.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's what McCarthy's point there is. What would you do? What would you do? I mean, it's easy to armchair quarterback, but in these split seconds like this, I mean, you got to make a call, and he went for the safety of his son. All right. So the man and the son are walking along. The boy is troubled. There's something, he's not really talking very much. And the man says, I want you to tell me what's the matter. It's okay. The boy said, no, he didn't want to talk about it. The man said, look at me. And the boy turned and looked. The boy looked like he'd been crying. The father says, just tell me. And the boy says, we would never eat anybody, would we? The man says, no, of course not. And the boy says, even if we were starving. The man says, we're starving now. And he said, you said we weren't starving. The man said, no, I said we weren't dying. I said, I didn't say we weren't starving. And the boy says, but we wouldn't eat people. The man says, no, we wouldn't. And the boy says, no matter what. The man says, no matter what. And the boy says, because we're the good guys. Yes. And we're carrying the fire, the boy says. And the man says, yes, we're carrying the fire. Yes. And the boy says, okay. And I think that, and see, the boy understands what separates the good guys from the bad guys here. And we talk about good guys not eating people, and that's kind of obvious, but I mean, it gets to that point here. And I think that eating people, you lose your humanity when you resort to things like that, when you compromise yourself to that point. And I think the boy he understands very clear, that's a line we will not cross. We value life. We're not going to steal, as we're going to see in a little bit later on. We're not going to take from what doesn't belong to us, and another human life does not belong to us to use for food or something sick like that. And we will not compromise on that standard. And then the boy goes on to mention the other little boy again. He says, I wish that he was here with us. We could take care of him. Then they come across another house and another shed, and they go in there. They lost their lighter, so they've got to try to find another way to start a fire. And the father uses an old beer bottle, a scrap of curtain. He rigs up a new lamp, and he uses a piece of flint and a pair of pliers to start a flame. And this is what, and the father explicitly says this. He says, this is something else that good guys don't do. Good guys don't give up. They keep trying. They don't give up. And I think that the father, maybe you're right. Maybe he realizes he's kind of wrestling with his decision there to leave those people. But we don't give up. That's what good guys do. They stick with it. Right. I do think that's, even in the midst of a hard time, what we were talking about, you stick with your morality. You don't give up on your principles just because the going gets tough. I would say that definitely objectively makes them good guys there, right? And again, one thing real quick, right. Good people aren't perfect people. That's not possible right now. So we're not talking about being morally flawless. We're talking about being good, morally good. And I would say that so far the man and the son have hit objective principles that prove their morality, wouldn't you?
I think so too. I mean, really, even the fact that the man questions and wonders, well, did I do the right thing? And what should I do in the future? That is part of what makes him good, is that he's trying to do what's right, not necessarily that he does the perfect thing 100% of the time, which no one does, right. But that he thinks through what he's doing. He thinks through the decisions he's made. And like you said, he keeps trying. And I don't know that we're meant to come to a clear decision of this was the right thing or this was the wrong thing. This was just what he did. Right. But he's not saying, well, I did something wrong, so now I'm just going to keep growing more and more evil. I'm going to dig in my heels on the decision I made. He's thinking, well, how do I do what's right next time?
You don't give up on trying to be good and do what's right. Even if you feel like you made a misstep there, you keep pushing forward. I think that's what the man's kind of getting at here. You don't give up. Now,
and it's surprising how easy it is when you have made a wrong decision to just dig in on that and think, well, I'm already not perfect. Well, why don't I just do this and that? But that's not what we're meant to do. We're meant to keep going back to Christ and seeking forgiveness. But it's irrational, but it's just amazing how much having done something wrong makes it easier to do something wrong again.
It makes you almost want to keep sliding down that downward spiral. Just keep going.
Exactly.
I've already messed up, so let's just keep on going. And that's giving up, and I think you're
Exactly.
you're 100% right there. All right, so they've been starving, and hunger has been an issue through this whole thing. Well, now by the grace of God, Evie, they come across some good fortune. We've gotten past the parade of depravity. We've gotten past the cannibal house there, and the next big thing we come to is the underground bunker of food. There was somebody who had prepped an underground bunker of food, and they were on the verge of starving to death, and they just happened to come across this. And it's stocked full with all kinds of food supplies. They've got showers, they've got, like chemical toilets in there and everything. I mean, a full-fledged doomsday bunker there. And and they were able to replenish themselves there and with food and supplies. And I just want to say this now. I know you wanted to talk about the bunker for just a second. And I want to mention this before we do. I like what the boy says before they get down there and before they eat anything. The boy wants to thank the people who are apparently dead because nobody's in there and it hasn't been opened. He wants to thank them for the food that they're about to eat. And the boy says, "Dear people, thank you for all this food and stuff. We know that you saved it for yourself, and if you were here, we wouldn't eat it no matter how hungry we were." And again, that's going back. We're not going to steal it from you, even though we're starving. And we're sorry that you didn't get to eat it, and we hope that you're safe in heaven with God. And then the boy looks up at his father and he says, "Is that okay?" And the father says, "Yes, I think that's okay." And that really, we've had these real dark moments that really send chills, down your spine and really kind of resonate. And then you've got just such this little sweet, tender, good moment here, and the boy is just good. You know what I'm saying? And this really stuck with me too. I mean, he really cares about these people that he doesn't even know. And rather than just going down there and just gorging himself on all their food, before they eat, he wants to stop and say thank you. And I hope that you're safe. And we wouldn't eat this if you were here because we're not going to steal it from you. This is just a good kid. You know what I mean?
I mean, if for a kid that age to even think there were people here before, and he doesn't just come on this bunker and think, well, obviously this is for me. Everything is for me. He's thinking they prepared this. There were real people who lived here before. I think that shows, to me, remarkable insight for such a young kid.
Right.
He doesn't just see, well, there's food in front of me. Well, it's meant for me.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Hey, we need it, so we're going to take it. He's like,
right.
No, we're going to actually act civilized here. I mean, we're not going to steal it, no matter how hungry we are. Now, what did you want to mention about the bunker?
Well, my main question about the bunker is, why don't they stay in the bunker? I mean, I understand from the story perspective, if they just stayed in the bunker, the story ends there. But if I'm the father, I think that would be the decision I would make. We're in a good place. We've got plenty of supplies. It can't be more dangerous here than it is out in the world. So why is it that they keep going? I think there's got to be an answer to that. What are they seeking going back out on the road after they have found a safe place? What seems like one of the safer places they could have, and plenty of supplies. So what do you think? Why do they go back out on the road after that?
I think the father is just being overly cautious. Remember when they found that waterfall and the son said, "This is a good place." And the father said, "Yeah, it is, but we found it. Somebody else is going to find it too. And we want to avoid all potential of threats." And I agree with you. I would have stayed there till the supplies ran out, But I think he feels his attitude is, we found it. Somebody else could find it. And that somebody else could be trouble. And we don't want to get stuck in here with our backs. I mean, literally underground with our backs against the wall. And, become part of the food, I guess. I don't know. But that's just what I think. I agree with you, though. I would have said, well, let's just stay here for a while. We've got beds, we've got cots, we've got showers, I mean, we can wash our clothes, we can wash our hair and everything, and it actually got so warm that they had to start taking some of their coats and stuff off because, I mean, and they had been freezing just, a couple days earlier. And I see what you're saying there. And that's the only logic I can give. Because that's the same logic he applied to that waterfall. We found it, therefore somebody else is going to find it, and I don't want to be here when those other people come along.
I mean, I think that may be it, but I also feel like it's a different scenario. It's a shelter, I mean,
Yeah.
you would think the father's pretty handy with tools. He could
Mm-hmm.
rig up a lock. I mean, and they were obviously the first people who found it. I think if you're thinking just purely pragmatically in terms of survival, you stay in the bunker. So that's why I'm kind of wondering, to tie back what you were saying about the little boy, where he wants to just live and not survive. If you just want to survive, you stay at the bunker, because somebody could find you there, but you go out on the road, it's almost certain you're going to encounter dangerous people on the road.
One, I just thought of this, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but I want to get this out
Oh,
before I
no,
forget
no.
about it. Remember when they were in the bunker, they heard a dog. And it's that
Did they?
dog comes back into play. And I think that's what kind of spooked the man, is that other people are around and other people are going to find this. And as we'll see, in the next episode, it's that family with that little kid that's been, and with the dog that's been following them. And I guess to kind of watch them and see if they're good people. And we'll get into that next episode. But I think that's what spooked the man. That dog comes back into play. I'm pretty sure it says there that he heard a dog barking. And he kind of lifted up the hatch. It was raining at one point. I think he said he heard a dog barking. And
No, that makes sense. That does make sense. And I guess I think you're right. I think within the story, the reason he moves on is because he thinks there is an immediate danger because of the dog. By the way, I feel kind of stupid because I didn't connect back up that the family at the end, that they have made several appearances throughout the story.
in the background.
I didn't connect that back up. Right. Yeah. I didn't realize that the dog and the little boy are the same. And that, I think that's really cool, but I didn't, maybe that's the benefit of having read this several times. I only read it once, but I didn't make that connection. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, I think he leaves because the dog, I think you're right. But I do kind of feel like, is he moving onward because he has some sort of hope? And that's something we were talking about last time, that there is a sense that there could be something good out there. They're moving on. Is he leaving because there is the hope that there could be something better in front of them?
Their ultimate goal is heading for the coast. Remember, that's kind of where they want to get to warmer weather. And I guess he thinks there might just be people down there, and they never really get into why he thinks that way. But that seems to be the plan. And so I think that's one thing too. We want to keep moving toward, the coast. It just, for whatever reason, that seems to be the goal there, And
for what? Yeah.
When they get out and leave, now I don't really want to touch on this too long. They come across an old man, and the man, the father, wants to just kind of leave him alone. And the son actually, look, we've got supplies from the bunker. Let's ask him to come eat with us. And the man kind of looks at him like, "Are you crazy?" And the boy's like, "No, we should share with him." And the father is very gruff with the older man, and the boy is very, very, very cordial and very helpful, very civilized with him. And then they come across these three random guys. It's these guys, and this is just kind of a blink and you'll miss it sort of thing. Father and his son come across three men who emerge from behind a truck, and the men are emaciated. They're clothed in rags, and they're holding lengths of pipes. They've got their weapons there. And the men ask, "What have you got in the basket?" They're pushing along that cart there. And the father just immediately levels the pistol at them, and he kept it there. And they move on without incident. He just aims the pistol, and he doesn't say a word, and they walk on by. And my question here is, the men, are these bad guys? Are they really threatening? They just asked a question. They didn't make any threatening moves. They didn't make any violent advance. Now, the man had a gun, and they had pipes, so they were obviously outgunned there. But is it possible that the man overreacted, and maybe in treating everybody like a threat, these might have been some actual good guys that they could have linked up with? And real quick, the boy throughout this holds out hope for the existence of other good guys. And the father just kind of tells them that they're out there, but he never wants to really actively try to find them. And the boy says, "There are other good guys. You said so." The man said, "Yes." And the boy says, "So where are they?" The man says, "They're hiding." And the boy says, "Who are they hiding from?" And the man says, "They're hiding from each other." And the boy says, "Are there lots of them? Are there lots of good guys?" And the man says, "We don't know." And the boy says, "But some." The man says, "Some, yes." And then the boy says, "Is that true?"
Is that true?
The man says, "Yes, that's true." The boy says, "But it might not be true." And the man says, "I think it's true." The boy says, "Okay." And then the man says, "You don't believe me." And the boy says, "I believe you." And he says, "Okay, And the boy says, I always believe you. And the man says, I don't think so. And the boy
Right.
says, yes, I do. I have to believe you because he's his guide. He's his father. He's his source for wisdom and learning how to be and what to do. And, were these guys good guys? We don't know, and that's one thing that McCarthy kind of leaves unanswered here. I mean, that's just a chance the father's not willing to take with his son, and I can't say I blame him. I can't say I blame him as a father. I can't say I would do anything different, but overly cautious people miss out on good opportunities because they're overly cautious to a fault. There's nothing wrong with being cautious. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being cautious, but overly cautious people miss out. And maybe the father missed out on a couple of nice opportunities here with this old man and with these people. But maybe not. The old man turned out not to be a threat because he's an old, decrepit man. But these guys, who knows? And I think that's one thing McCarthy says there. Who knows? We don't know. All right. So anyway, anything else you want to say about the bunker there? Or we're going to close on to one other scene of inhuman carnage. Evie, anything nice you want to say before we move on to our last violent scene?
Well, I would just say it does turn out at the end that the father was right. He held out hope that there were other good people, and they had been near them the whole time.
Right. Yes.
But you're also that you see the tension with the father though, because he's hoping he's hoping in theory there are good people, but there are good people nearby all this time, and he's afraid of them, and he's sort of running from them throughout the whole book. And I think that's an interesting point.
That's what he said.
They could
we're
have
hiding from each other.
They could have banded forces with these people the whole way, and they didn't.
Right, exactly. And he says we're hiding from each other, and I think that's true. The good people are hiding from each other because they're afraid of coming across some of these really bad guys.
Yeah.
All right, Evie. Now this goes up there. The next episode is going to be a little bit brighter. As bright as this book can get. But this one, we got one more scene of just, like I said, inhuman carnage here. The father and son come across. Now, this is just difficult. The father and son come across the charred remains of a baby that was headless and gutted and blackened on a spit. So somebody had, killed and eaten an infant. And the boy's reaction, of course, is natural. He's horrified, and he's horrified to the point that he's speechless for a long time. And it seems to have this scene here where somebody would actually kill and eat a baby. It seems to have punctured his soul and kind of like drained some of the life out of his spirit or something like that. It just kind of, deflated him, And finally, when the boy did speak, he just kind of brings it up out of nowhere. He says, if we had that little baby, it could go with us. And the father says, yes, it could. And the boy says, where did they find it? And the man didn't answer. He didn't want to plant that thought, like maybe this child's parents were the ones that killed it and ate the child. Maybe he didn't want to plant that thought in his boy's mind. And the boy asks, could there be another one somewhere? Another baby out there. And the man says, I don't know. It's possible. And then the boy says something out of the blue. I'm sorry what I said about those people. And the man says, what people? And they had come across some people that that had been burned up on the side of the road. And he says, those people that got burned up, they were stuck in the road that got burned up. And the man said, I didn't know you said anything bad. And the boy said, it wasn't bad. Can we go now? And father said, okay. Do you want to ride in the cart? His son's obviously, sad here. You want daddy to take you for a ride in the cart? Because they used to do that earlier in the episode. And his son would smile. And the son says, that's okay. The father says, why don't you ride for a while? The boy says, I don't want to. It's okay. And the boy, I think, is really starting to grow up. He's really starting to understand what the world is like and how evil it is. And he realizes now that he can't escape into childish pleasures and just avoid the darkness of the world in which he lives. And, that's what this scene also gets to. And I don't want to talk about this too long because it's just so dark. But these people actually got to the point where, it probably was. He doesn't give us for sure, but it probably was this child's parents who killed that child and ate the child, right? Because a baby's not going to just be crawling along out there, by himself or herself or whatever. And he swore he couldn't. He couldn't do that. The father said, I thought I could take your life if I needed to, but I just can't." And there are people out there that when it came down to their children or them, that they were going to kill their baby and eat the baby so they could survive. And I think that's a level of depravity as well. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
I mean, to kill your own child, not to kill your own child to save him harm, not for that reason. You can almost understand that, but to sacrifice your child so that you could eat and live. That's just no kind of parent. Well, it's hard for a parent to think that. I can't imagine that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the boy shows his innocence and his goodness too. We would take that baby too. That little boy. I want to help out that little boy. I want to help out that baby. These are extra mouths to feed, but you know what? Take it out of my share. I'll share with them. We'll take the dog too. And I just think this shows just how good the boy is, and I think that's one reason why in their interaction with the old man, the man said, I kind of think he's a god. His son. What if I told you that he's a god? In other words, he is the boy is like God to the man. He's keeping him tethered to a sense of humanity, a sense of morality. He's that bar to which the man strives to achieve. I want to be as good as my son. And I think we as parents, I think every parent experiences that to an extent. You realize that you're not just teaching your children are teaching you too, and your children are helping you out too. And we strive to be better people for the sake of our children, and our children make us better people. And just to get to the point where you kill your own child just to feed yourself, that's just dark, man. That's just dark.
Well, you see what a good father the man is, because he has protected his son throughout, and the son is sort of eager to model that, to have the baby or the dog, something for the boy to protect. Like he has seen that in his father, and he wants to do that himself. So I think that shows good parenting on the man's part, that he's been the protector, and now his son is growing into someone who also wants to be the protector.
Evie, I could not have said that any better. And in fact, I think we're going to end it there, because now we're getting into territory for the next episode. The boy becomes the man, and he carries on in his father's image. And that's what our next, the theme of our next episode is going to be. So why don't we end it there with a quick recap. I said, this is what good guys do. Okay? They value life. According to this is the moral standard of the man and his son here. They value life. Good guys value life. They want to join up with other good guys and build a life together. They want to nurture family relationships. They want to develop a sense of home. They want to protect and preserve those people that they value the most. Good guys don't give up. They never quit, even when it gets tough, especially when it gets tough. They don't quit. They don't steal. They're thankful. They're civilized. They have a concept of a healthy society. And Evie, I think our main takeaway here is this, that the man and his son are living out these morals even when society has broken down, even when there's no government to punish them for doing wrong. In fact, you may even be, quote unquote, rewarded for doing things the wrong way here, for being more savage in this world. And I think what the man and the son teach us here, and this is where we'll end, morals apply even when government and society break down. I mean, wouldn't we agree? It's wrong to eat people. Right? It's wrong to steal, even if there's no government telling you. You don't need a government to tell you that, right?
It's not about the punishment.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's not about the punishment. And so I ask you this. What do you think about this? This means that when government's not there and society's not there, that morals still apply, that morals and the source of morals transcends government and human social constructs. Would you agree?
I agree, because it comes from who we are as people, made in the image of God. It's not about the consequences. I mean, we have laws to keep society orderly and to teach people, but at the same time, morality comes from our being made in the image of God and in our identity and who we are. And there's certain things that a human does, and there are things that are inhuman, and we have to choose not to do those things.
There is a right way to live. I mean,
Yes.
there's an objective right way, a moral standard that we should live by. I think we all just inherently have a sense of that, whether, we agree with, what that, I mean, whether or not we don't always act on that sense, but we would all agree that we have a sense of morality that we should live by. And, even if you're not going to get caught, you should still do the right thing, even because we are all always going to have to answer for the decisions that we make with God. I think we all have an inherent sense of that. Paul tells us that, in Romans 1. We will have, we're going to have to answer for every decision we make. And I think that's why some people try to get rid of the concept of God, is because they don't want to have to morally answer for their lives. They don't want to have to answer to God for how they've lived their lives. Every decision that they've made, there's a moral aspect to life. And, I think that we would be wise to keep that in mind, that it's just because the government says something is legal doesn't make it moral, And we would be wise to realize that there is an objective moral standard that God expects us to live by. And no matter what our circumstances are, whether we're living now in a civilized society or if we're living in a world that's crashing and burning and all the societal structures have been thrown out the window, we're still morally obligated to live. We're still morally obligated to reflect the image of God. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And, God has given us all a conscience where we can tell right from wrong, but we have to use it, because if you choose wrong, then over time your conscience does become clouded.
Yes.
And you're going to lose sight of what is right and what's wrong, and not even realize what you have become. So I 100% agree that we have to live in accordance with how God has made us and how he's taught us to live.
Very good. All right, Eddie. Well, I think we had some dark moments here, but I think we were able to mine some light out of it. What do you think?
I think
I'm looking forward to our next one, because we really get to see the boy becoming the man that the father was raising him to be. So I know this episode was a little dark, and hang around for the next one. The next one will be, I can't tell you it won't be dark. There'll be some dark moments there, but it will end on an uplifting note. So
it's what you expect at the midpoint of the story. It's where things are getting darker and darker, and then is there going to be light at the end? That's what we're looking for.
Very good. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast of the moral of the story. Join us next time as Evie and I conclude our study of Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Hope you've enjoyed our first two episodes, and we'll see you on the third one. Have a great day.